Coach Lee Hopkins. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I want to welcome you to the Engaged Employee Podcast. Our mission is to emphasize the relationship between the employee and the workplace with the goal of enhancing engagement levels to create a more productive and satisfying work environment. While many organizations strive to create a more engaging atmosphere, they often miss the mark by forcing connection with big team building events like axe throwing or escape rooms. Those activities only leave employees with a short-lived sense of belonging. Organizations may also try smaller and more suffocating events like happy hours or group birthday celebrations that their employees feel obligated to attend. As a social connections and business culture coach, I've found that to create a stable, engaged, and productive workforce, there needs to be a shift in focus from mandatory fun and manufactured connection towards building trust and authentic conversation. Join me and a guest as we dive into social wellness strategies for the individual employee, techniques for developing interpersonal relationships with coworkers, and even some approaches for leaders to enrich the overall organizational culture. The Engaged Employee Podcast starts now. Hello, I'm Coach Lee Hopkins. Welcome to the Engaged Employee Podcast. My guest today is Erich Kurschat. Erich is the owner of Harmony Insights LLC, a company that helps companies and consultants build high-performing teams and revenue streams around everything DISC and the 5 behavior assessments. He is also the founder of HRHotSeat, an inclusive mastermind community of HR professionals solving real HR problems. Erich draws from a broad range of experiences as a corporate HR professional, a public speaker, a classical musician, and a proud introvert to inspire others towards meaningful work and productive workplace relationships. Our conversation today will be focused on individual self-care strategies for the employees, as well as our conversation today will be focused on individual self-care strategies for the employees. Erich, welcome to the Engaged Employee Podcast.
Thank you very much, Coach Lee. I am all excited by your intro video. I feel like we could spend our entire conversation just talking about that.
Well, I do like to talk about me.
Don't we all?
But certainly, I know you didn't mean about me, but the culture of the workplace. The culture of the workplace is that it really is based on my own personal experiences as well. You know, that's why I started doing this podcast. That's why I started coaching in the first place, because I've always felt out of place and really disconnected, and I didn't know how to make that work in the workplace. It just, as an introvert myself, it really seemed like I lived in my head and everyone spoke their thoughts. And by the time I wanted to speak, it was too late. It was way too late. And so, but here we're here to talk about you and get to learn more about you. So I'd love to learn what you do. We shared a bit of your profession. I've shared a little bit about your profession, but how did you get into that and how do you help the people that you serve?
So I spent 16 years in corporate HR, and I just got a job out of college, and I'm loyal and stuck with it for 16 years. And around 2015, I decided that I needed to figure out if I was wired to be self-employed. I had learned about this thing called the DISC personality assessment, and I just fell in love with it, which is like a super nerdy thing to say, that I fell in love with the personality assessment.
Of course.
But I did. And honestly, to this day, even I've done some immensely rewarding work. I'm not sure if I'm wired to be self-employed. I think sometimes I make a pretty good number two. But that being said, the opportunity to work with businesses and with consultants to really leverage the DISC and 5 behaviors assessments, to bring them to life, to support their teams and their clients in their efforts to connect meaningfully with one another, meaningfully and productively, using these common languages of DISC and the 5 behaviors. That work is some of the best and most rewarding and fulfilling I've ever done.
Yeah, absolutely. The connection, I keep hearing connection and creating a team, you need connection. We used to believe that, and I think that in past corporate life, we used to believe that, well, everyone just needs to be working towards a common goal and then everyone will be fine. We can get things done. But we discovered more about ourselves as humans, as people, and what it really means to reach those goals. And having this connection really helps us reach the goal faster. And we feel a lot better about the accomplishments that we've had. So, with this, I'd like to learn a little bit more. I don't know if the audience is familiar with the DISC assessment. Everyone's heard of it, but if you can give us a little bit about the DISC assessment and also the five strengths
The five
assessment,
behaviors.
five behaviors assessment. You
Yes.
share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, Everything Disc, I'm an authorized partner for Wiley's Everything Disc product, which is the only version of Disc linked back to the original Disc model. Disc is a simple, accessible model that says that there are four primary styles, personality or behavior styles, the D, I, S, and C styles. Everybody is a combination or a mix of all four, but we gravitate toward one or two, sometimes three, that really resonate with us. So the D or dominant style is very direct and decisive and focused on taking action and getting results. The I or influencing style is actively paced, focused on people and relationships, very energetic and enthusiastic, great with the big picture. The S or steadiness style is a little bit more moderately paced, still focused on people, but very systematic in their work, valuing cooperation more than collaboration. Are we on the same page? Are all voices being heard? And then that C or conscientiousness style, and that's the hardest thing about the C style is spelling conscientiousness, is moderately paced but focused on tasks and valuing accuracy. Am I correct in what I'm saying, or at the very least, not wrong? And again, we're a mixture of all four. We gravitate toward one or another, and each of us sort of speaks a different language, a different disc language in the workplace. If we layer on top of disc the five behaviors of a cohesive team based in Patrick Lencioni's book, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, we build on this base layer of communication that we set with disc to talk about how we build trust and we navigate conflict and we make commitments and hold each other accountable to those commitments and drive toward results ultimately. So two fantastic models, two wonderful shared languages within organizations that help us have a vitally important conversation about how we do our best work and how we connect meaningfully with others. Not that manufactured connection that you talk about in
Absolutely.
the opening video.
Absolutely. And for introverts, it seems like, I'm going to speak for myself. I don't want to speak for all of introverts, but I know that I have this podcast because I value that more meaningful relationship and that slower kind of intentional conversation. And I wonder, how do you help? Because you're also an introvert and you understand this experience. How do you see these two modalities working to help introverts feel more connected?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And DISC doesn't use introversion as a language. That's more Myers-Briggs, but the C or conscientiousness style on the DISC model correlates with that introversion that you're talking about there. And so I, early on as an introvert myself, realized that I did my best work when I was heads down in a cube, away from other people, really able to be analytical and focused on my work without the distraction of others and without this distraction of feelings and emotions and the sorts of things that can cloud my thinking as somebody who prefers a more logical approach to things. When I left the corporate space, I hadn't nurtured a network. I didn't have an active LinkedIn profile. I wasn't actively networking myself. And I realized as a new business owner, and probably should have recognized much sooner, that this was going to be really important to me. And so I started becoming active in various networking communities around Chicago where I live. And I'll tell you, Lee, I attended one event, a speed networking event, where we were lined up shoulder to shoulder about 2 feet from another line, and you had like 30 seconds, and then you had to shift by one person and keep doing that. And I thought, there has to be a better way to do this. I, as an introvert, would like to surround myself by other introverts who are also trying to figure out how to connect meaningfully and productively with others and not feel like we have to network like our extroverted friends are doing it. You know, they do it wonderfully and they do it in their own way, but the way that extroverts network is not going to be the way that I'm going to feel most comfortable networking. So I started presenting a session called Network Like an Introvert, and I've just had some fascinating conversations with folks along the way.
Yes, that sounds networking like an introvert sounds beautiful. The idea, as you were talking of describing this networking event that you've gone to, it seems so systematic and so impersonal and pretty difficult to make that connection. And those introverts out there who are listening are probably dying to hear how this networking works for you as an introvert. What could they do if they found themselves in some situations like that? Could you share a few tips to help introverts feel better at networking?
I'm happy to. And the first is something I've already mentioned, not trying to do it the way that other people do it. I think a quote that's attributed to Einstein is something like, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life believing it's stupid, you know, feeling that it is stupid. And so I think we have to embrace our own strengths and say, okay, what do I bring that's uniquely valuable to a networking conversation? A lot of people are uncomfortable networking because they feel it's very scripted. You know, what do you do? And then that launches this conversation that you've probably had a million times about what you do. And it, even just saying it, it feels scripted. It also feels kind of just empty and transactional. And so I say, if you want to avoid scripted responses, we can't ask scripted questions. So instead of asking, what do you do when you're at a networking event or you're learning about somebody for the first time, have your very first question be, why do you do what you do? Those of us who are networks, introvert and kind of analytical, can also be good listeners at times, and more comfortable if we put the spotlight on other people. If you ask somebody why they do what they do, they're going to look at you, kind of cock their head, and almost, you know, maybe even say, I've never been asked that question before. I guarantee anything that follows is going to be far more interesting and worthwhile to discuss than if you started with, what do you do? So that's one of my favorite tips, is kind of flip the script on its head a little bit.
I love that. I love that. I personally was geeking out behind the scenes because you said why. I'd love to understand more about what people do and why they do it. The conversation is automatically more interesting to me, so it makes it a lot easier for me to stay engaged and want to connect. And if it has the same impact on the other person, that is all the better. That's all the
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
So it's important. So the biggest takeaway that I hear, it's important to be yourself. Well, not try to network like extroverts do. Tap into the energy that you have and show up as your authentic self.
I would agree. While recognizing that extroverts, the way they network is good for them and it's admirable, and there are aspects of what they do that I can certainly borrow from, but I can't
Absolutely.
discount my own natural way of doing things, because then I'm not going to want to do it at all.
Absolutely. Of course. So, well, I wonder, I feel like we could talk a whole lot about introversion and how it affects networking. I wonder if we could share a bit about if you have some suggestions about how to connect with those individuals who are in the workplace. So I know networking events, we have this idea that we're in the space because we are meant to, there's a purpose to the space. We're meant to connect with the others there. But something that's a little more unstructured, like in the work environment, where we have people there that we work with, but as you mentioned, we feel a lot comfortable. You may feel a lot more comfortable just being by yourself with your head down, doing the work that you want to do that feels good to you, but also knowing that you also need to build a network with your coworkers. Do you have any suggestions on how someone might start doing that? Maybe opening up conversation. What's a good way to go about that?
So, a couple of things that immediately come to mind when you're having meetings that probably typically are more formal. If you're in a position to be able to influence the agenda of that meeting, and instead of jumping right into business, giving people the opportunity to talk about maybe how they're feeling, something topical in the news, how their week has been, what they're celebrating. just to open it up with something that gets people open and talking and building trust on a team, that can really help you get to know other people. I would not, for example, just show up at somebody's desk and sit down on their desk and ask them how their weekend has been. That'll work for some people and not for others. But if you're in a position to influence the topic of conversation, you'll get to the business piece. Prioritize getting to know the folks that you work with. And if you're doing this virtually, encourage an active chat. Sometimes the introverts among us are less comfortable unmuting ourselves and coming on video in conversation, in video conversation, but we are far more comfortable in the chat, sharing things about what we're up to and what we're excited about and what we're celebrating. And so if you are in a place to be able to encourage an active chat in a virtual conversation, that can be a way to get folks to open up and build that trust that we're talking about as being so important.
Wow, I love that. Those are two powerful tips. I really enjoy the idea of influencing the conversation and prioritizing get to know each other, especially with the idea of what are you celebrating? What are you celebrating? And speaking of celebrations, I know that you'll be celebrating something sometime soon. Tell
Great
us about
segue.
this.
You're a master at this. Yeah, I am going to welcome, my wife and I are going to welcome twins into our family in just a few weeks here. So we have a 2.5-year-old already named Evie, and we're welcoming twins. And I'll tell you, there's a lot that goes into that for anyone who's had children. You kind of get a sense of what we're in for. But on this topic of introversion, Lee, it's really fascinating to kind of apply that, even if in a fun way, to our children, and the fact that, before putting Evie to bed the other night, I was asking her about her day and kind of engaging her in conversation. And she looked up at me and she said, "Dada," what did she say? No talk. Which is as clear as she could be that she was done for the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we go in for ultrasounds for the twins, there's one that is always more visible, that's easier to get pictures of, and the other kind of stays in the background and is harder to get pictures of. And so I'm thinking, like, is that child of the two, going to be less comfortable in the spotlight? And what could that mean in terms of how they, of course I'm taking that a little far at that point, but I think it's just a fascinating conversation to have.
It is a very fascinating conversation. I love the insights that you have, and your daughter sounds like she knows what she wants. No talk,
She
no
does.
talk.
Yeah. No talk or no say things. It was one of those, but I was like, okay, I get it.
Absolutely. And nurturing that at a young age. Eric, it has really been a delight to talk to you and to open up, to hear more of your life and to share more about how introversion can be how to network as an introvert, how to network as an introvert. The last question that I have for you is, of course, where can people find you to celebrate you? Because if you find Eric on the socials, make sure you say congratulations to him.
Oh, thank you. That's kind of you to say. I am Harmony Insights is my company, as you mentioned. So harmonyinsights.com is a great place to go. I'm probably far too active on LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/in/Erich Kurschat, which is my name. On Twitter or X or whatever people are calling it these days, at Harmony Insights, and then the same on Facebook. And I'm impressed with your tech skills there, pulling them up as I've said them. For anyone in your audience who is an HR professional or serves the HR profession, I also run an HR networking community, a free HR networking community called HRHotSeat. So even this introvert can build and grow his own networking community.
Absolutely. And I highly recommend that you check all of them out. You check out the HR Hot Seat. I'm a member of the community, and it's a fantastic community. Eric, thank you so much for being here.
I've really enjoyed this conversation.
All right, take care. Another insightful episode of the Engaged Employee Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the deep dive into the world of employee engagement, leadership, and workplace dynamics. The Engaged Employee Podcast is brought to you by the Patterns of Possibility, where we help people make more meaningful relationships in both their personal and professional life. Before we wrap up, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our incredible guests and, of course, our loyal listeners. Your support keeps us motivated to bring you valuable content each week. If you found today's discussion thought-provoking and want to learn more about how we can help you or your organization make more meaningful relationships, go to patternsofpossibility.com and book a friendly conversation with me. Or you can email me your questions at patternsofpossibility@gmail.com. Stay connected with us and engage with fellow listeners by following the Patterns of Possibility on LinkedIn. You can also catch us on YouTube. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell to stay in the loop. And if you prefer the audio version, make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Your support means the world to us, and by subscribing, you'll never miss an episode. Thank you for being a part of our journey to create workplaces where passion meets productivity. Until next time, I'm Coach Lee. Stay engaged, stay inspired.